we're optimistic that soon vaccines will be widely distributed and we will begin to get back to normal. But in the meantime, Minnesotans have really intensive needs from housing to childcare to healthcare. And we have a package that we want to talk about today that addresses some of the most urgent needs that Minnesotans are facing. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Majority Leader Brian Winkler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and welcome everyone. Despite the huge challenges that are facing our state and our nation right now, House Democrats are determined to advance a public policy agenda to address the needs of Minnesotans. Priorities we are announcing today are immediate steps that the legislature can and should take to help workers, families, small businesses, and so many others hurt most by the COVID-19 pandemic. We know the pandemic has not impacted all Minnesotans equally. COVID-19 has laid bare the structural inequalities of our political and economic systems. The rich and well-connected do better than ever, while working Minnesotans are living paycheck to paycheck and suffering most at the hands of COVID-19. Our first priority for the 2021 session is all about making sure we give back to the Minnesotans who have given the most and risked the most to keep the rest of us safe and healthy. Our nurses and frontline healthcare workers, the hospitality workforce and restaurants and bars that employ them, childcare providers and teachers. These are the people, these are the heroes that have helped us get through this pandemic. House Democrats are going to put them front and center and make sure that all working Minnesotans do better coming out of this pandemic than they were going in. And with that, I will turn it over to Liz Olson, our Speaker Pro Tem and Deputy Majority Leader.
Thank you, Majority Leader Winkler. Well, as we've heard, that COVID-19 has challenged us all in impossible ways. And no matter the difficulties that we find ourselves in, we can still have a vision of obtaining security for everyone in Minnesota now and in the future. So our House DFL priorities will help protect the health, the safety, and economic security of Minnesotans now and empower them to succeed and thrive once we put this chapter behind us. So the agenda we're announcing today isn't an exhaustive list of our goals, but represents some concrete steps that we can take right now to solve the many of the urgent challenges that are facing Minnesotans from all backgrounds all over our state. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. Minnesotans care for one another, and I'm hopeful we can work together to ensure that we can bounce back from this crisis. And with that, I think we're going to turn it over to the bill authors.
Good morning, Representative Mahmoud Nur. I'm the chief author for House File 1, Economic Security. Quite frankly, economic security during the COVID-19 pandemic is critical to ensure families' safety, health, and well-being. Many families are struggling to make ends meet. It's about dignity and ensuring that we help those who need the most. We've had several times about the K-shaped recovery, which has helped the Wall Street, but not the Main Street. Our objective here is to ensure that we support the families who need the most and give them the help that they need now, from the food insecurity that we're facing for many people who suffer from hunger, for those who are on MFIP, DWP, for those who need housing assistance and broadband. With that, I just wanted to turn over to my colleagues who are supporting and carrying with me this bill, Representative Mike Howard.
Thank you, Representative Noor. Throughout this pandemic, the importance of having a safe place to lay your head has never been more important for health, for safety, for economic security. And the stakes are real. A recent report by Johns Hopkins School of Public Health studied states that had lifted eviction moratoriums, and they found that that action was linked to over 400,000 cases of COVID and over 10,000 deaths, directly related to the fact that people lost their ability to stay home and stay safe. We need to ensure that Minnesotans can afford the roof over their head, and that when we come out on the other side of this pandemic, Minnesotans aren't buried in debt. They aren't facing an eviction and its collateral damage. We need to make sure that Minnesotans have that security. And so House File 1 makes that commitment to Minnesota renters, homeowners, and landlords, that they get the assistance they need in their time of need. And we're making a commitment to an orderly end of the eviction moratorium that prevents a flood of those devastating evictions. We simply cannot afford to leave Minnesotans out in the cold. And next, I'd like to turn it over to Representative Rob Eklund.
Thank you. The pandemic has caused our reliance on technology, including high-speed internet access, to accelerate. Many rural areas are left behind. Access to reliable broadband access should no longer be seen as a luxury, but a necessity. I would liken it to the rural electrification of our country. Our legislation delivers a robust $120 million investment toward expanding access to this critical tool all students, businesses, and families deserve. And now I'll go to House File 2, which I am the chief author of the Worker Protection Bill. We are grateful for our frontline workers, school employees, and other essential workers who put themselves in harm's way by facing increased exposure to COVID just by showing up to work. As a result of the economic turmoil caused by COVID, workers in other sectors have found themselves out of jobs. We have a responsibility to ensure all Minnesotans can experience economic security, and the House DFL Worker Protection Package does so by delivering emergency paid sick leave for healthcare workers, ensuring workers' compensation for our school employees who contract COVID-19, and helping hospitality workers get back to work, and expanding unemployment insurance to those collecting Social Security. And with that, I will turn it over to Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Representative Eklund. As you just mentioned, our essential workers are on the front line, providing care for us, providing education for our students, and they're exposing themselves every day. It's very important that we provide worker protections and economic security for our frontline workers. If we call them essential workers, we must treat them like essential workers and make sure that they're exposed to the pandemic and have to quarantine at any point or actually contract COVID-19, that they can continue to provide and take care of their families. I will now pass it on to Representative John Hoyt.
Thank you, Representative Frazier. Our educators and school staff have already gone above and beyond in aiding our children and their families throughout the pandemic, accommodating them in in-person, hybrid, and distant learning. They have been out delivering meals, materials, and providing support to students and their families by checking in, reaching out, and helping in 1,000 different ways. Their support has been unwavering, and in this crisis, they deserve the ability to earn workers' compensation should they contact the virus and on the job. Just like our first responders, they need that security, and House File 2 will give them that. I now hand it on to Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Representative Hewitt. I'll be brief. So my focus is with the hospitality industry. Hospitality is an important part of the Minnesota economy. That's why getting hotel, airport, and other hospitality employees back to work is so important. This bill ensures that laid-off hospitality employees are offered good-paying jobs after the impacts of COVID-19. And I believe I hand this off to Representative Dabney.
Thank you, Representative Carlson. Good morning. The current recession has highlighted the challenges that too many Minnesotans face in leading full lives of dignity. Minnesota is the only state in the nation that penalizes Social Security recipients when they lose their jobs. Our unemployment compensation system should recognize that for many Social Security beneficiaries, they rely on supplementing those funds with work. The provision in House File 2 repeals the 50% deduction of Social Security benefit value that Minnesota deducts from some unemployment benefits. With that, I'd like to turn this over to Chair Liebling. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to talk just a bit about House File 3, which makes some allocations to assist our long-term care facilities who are still really dealing with COVID. We know that even though the vaccines are now rolling out, and we're very grateful for that, that the pace is going to be not quick enough to just take care of the whole problem at once. So we still need to focus on these long-term care facilities where the risk to residents and staff is still fairly high. So House File 3 puts forward some resources to help the Minnesota Department of Health with increased testing, with vaccinating residents, and very importantly, with supplying emergency staff when there are staff out sick, and that is creating a crisis in a long-term care facility. So these are extremely important measures that I hope we will be able to move forward pretty quickly this session. And with that, I will turn it over to Representative Howard.
Thank you, Representative Liebling. When this pandemic hit on a bipartisan basis, the legislature took action to help keep our homeless, our most vulnerable, safe. And that quick action and the heroic work of our frontline workers has undoubtedly saved lives. We know of just 6 Minnesotans who were unsheltered that we know of that have died from COVID. It's certainly more than that, but that's still a remarkable figure. And with federal funds expiring, we must renew this commitment to keep our most vulnerable Minnesotans safe, because in turn that keeps all of us safe. It's important to note that with this legislation, we can continue to prevent the wider spread of the virus and keep at-risk Minnesotans out of the hospital, saving lives and playing a significant role in preventing our hospital systems and ERs from becoming overwhelmed. This action made sense in March when the pandemic was beginning, and with the pandemic still a clear and present danger to Minnesotans, it makes sense now. We should renew our commitment, our bipartisan commitment to keep our most vulnerable safe, and that's what House File 3 does.
Next speaker is Representative Hassan.
Good morning, everyone. I am the author of House File 4, which provides wraparound services support for our students. The COVID-19 pandemic has taken a great toll on our education system. It has worsened our opportunity gap and has left our most vulnerable students struggling like never before. The House DFL will fight for wraparound student support services, strong investment to address the ongoing learning loss and increase in opportunity gaps, as well as funding stabilization to compensate for the temporary decrease in student enrollment. We will stand up for our students during this difficult time. Thank you. With that, I will give it to Chair Pinto. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hassan. Dave Pinto, the chair of the House Early Childhood Finance and Policy Committee. Minnesota's early care and learning providers were under deep financial stress even before the pandemic, and now we are at risk of losing this critical sector altogether. House File 5 would deliver grants to childcare providers and reduce waiting lists so that parents can work, employers can expand, and so that children can receive the great start that they deserve and that works for the benefit of all of us.